Hey folks, welcome back to My Kitten Reads. I'm Eleanor and this is my August wrap up. So I read 11 things in August, mostly not things that I was supposed to be reading, but um, I also went back into lockdown for the first time in a year in August. So there was some comfort reading happening, a lot of comfort reading. I'm actually nearly up to date with where I'm supposed to be in terms of overall reading goals, so that's good. But yeah, it was a bit of a mixed bag and a bit of comfort reading in August. So what I started with was Uncanny Magazine issue 41. This got me completely up to date with Uncanny Magazine. I'm not now because the new issues just come out, but essentially I was finally up to date. Like, I've read so many issues of Uncanny Magazine this year, it's ridiculous. But issue 41, two stories of note: The Wishing Pool by Tananarive Dewar, which was about grief and about the danger of not knowing how a wish will be interpreted by whatever entity is actually granting the wishes. And it's sort of not only dealt with grief, but a bit with dementia as well. So it had a lot of childhood memories, and then linking it back to a current issue with a parent who was winding down and getting ill. Yeah, there was that. And then the other one of note was The Graveyard by Eleanor Armason, which was about Icelandic ghosts who were bothering a farmer because a rich person from America who with Icelandic roots decided, oh, these pagan graveyards, let's make it a Christian graveyard and we'll just tidy it all up. And that made the spirits all restless because the spirits weren't actually, Christian. The thing that was really interesting about this story was the structure, in that it was a story being told by the curator of like a museum and historical site to a guest, rather than actually being from the perspective of the farmer. So it was a tale that was being told. Then I read Persuasion by Jane Austen, which is of course a reread, but this was for university. It was one of my texts for uni, so I reread Persuasion. I actually, not included in this list is an awful lot of poetry, because most of the first half of this unit that I'm currently doing is poetry, and so it's just individual poems each week, like half a dozen or so poems each week, but not like a single collection or anything like that, which means it's not on this list, but I have been reading a lot of poetry. But yes, Persuasion by Jane Austen, which is not my favourite of the Jane Austens, but it was really nice to read this again. I did it pretty much all in one day, because that was when the Dewey's reverse readathon was happening. And so I just sat down and read Persuasion, and that was fun. Then there was an audiobook that I was reading, which was called Enid, and that was by Robert Wainwright, who I read one of his other books earlier this year. So Enid is a biography of Enid Lindemann, who was a girl born in Australia to a winemaking family at the end of the 19th, start of the 20th century. And essentially she became this massive socialite, particularly in Europe. But like she had multiple husbands. She married an American millionaire who unfortunately passed away, so that marriage didn't last long. Then she moved to Europe and she married a general, and she married a lord, possibly multiple lords, I can't quite remember, and essentially lived this large socialite life. So that was a biography of her, this Australian woman who became this mysterious, glamorous figure in Europe. Then I read Lumberjanes, Volume 9, On a Roll. So that's by Shannon Waters and Kat Leigh, illustrated by Carolyn Nowak. And it's Lumberjanes, it's friends, it's having fun. And in this case, there was roller derby with like yetis and abominable snow people or whatever. So fun, lots of fun, and random traps, because it's Lumberjanes, and of course there are random traps. So always enjoy an issue of Lumberjanes. Then I went on as I do when I'm comfort reading, I went on a Jane Austen variation bit of a run. So a whole bunch of new ones that I haven't read before. I have actually been reading a lot of new ones this year. So Unknown Family Connections by Shanna Grandison. In this case, there was an evil duke way back 150 years ago, because he's evil, who purposely separated his two sons and essentially, not legally, but basically kicked out the second son. And the second son went off and married the woman he fell in love with and took her name, and the Bennets are descended from them. But there was a letter from the other brother, who later in life had realized what his father had done in separating them. And so he left a letter to be opened only if there were no remaining heirs for the dukedom. And this is what led to, there's actually this other line from my brother. And so the Bennets inherit a dukedom. Oh dear. That changes things, obviously. So there was that. A Change of Fortunes, also by Shanna Grandison, in which both Bennet parents have an epiphany that they need to improve their behaviour when their girls are quite young. And then Mrs. Bennet ends up having twin sons, and that changes the kind of parents, further changes the kind of parents that they are, and that changes the way the family grows up, and therefore the way the family interacts with all your usual characters. Then I actually did a bit of Hugo reading. Despite having had so much time, I'm way behind because I'm on lockdown. I haven't been able to go to the gym, which is when I was planning on doing most of my Hugo reading. But I have read one of the novelettes, which is Helicopter Story by Isabel Fall. Now, this is quite a controversial story because it wasn't taken well, and there was a whole conspiracy around it, which wasn't even true. And it essentially had a really bad effect on the actual author. It used to be called something different. It's now just called Helicopter Story. I can see why it's been nominated, and I can see what the author was trying to do. It just wasn't for me. So, it was not the kind of writing I enjoy. But I don't really, I've done some reading around the controversy. It's not something I'm willing to have a proper opinion on, although I think it was a bit of the internet run mad, and I do feel very sorry for the author, and empathy for the author. But yeah, it's not something that I really have a huge opinion on, but the story just wasn't for me. Then I read two books, which are 2 volumes of the same story, Netherfield's Duchess Book 1 and Netherfield's Duchess Book 2 by Victoria Lynn. And in this case, Netherfield Park is the dowager property of an inheritance by this dowager duchess from her own family's side of things. So she moves there with her, I think, goddaughter, Anne de Bourgh, and she takes an interest in the Bennet sisters, and things, again, go very differently because she decides that since she's stolen away Anne de Bourgh from her mother to teach her what she needs to know to run Rosings Park, she's going to teach the Bennet sisters as well, and therefore, yeah, they are already established as friends of Anne's when Darcy meets them. Then there was Prisoner of Longbourn, another Jane Austen one, which is Jan and Colin Rowland. So this is a co-written one. And this is there's an accident. Darcy gets thrown from his horse. Lizzie finds him. He's brought to Longbourn unconscious. Has broken a collarbone or something like that. But yeah, is basically restricted, but he gets all suspicious and he thinks Lizzie might have caused the accident, but she didn't, and all this kind of stuff. So there's a very, very grumpy Darcy in this one. And then the final thing I read in August was Mistress of Netherfield by Julia Winter, which is another Austen variation. In this one, Lizzie was forced to marry as a very young girl, to the guy who inherited Netherfield. It was not a good marriage and he died. So she now owns Netherfield, rents it out, and lives in the Dower House with Charlotte as her companion. And Darcy comes along with Bingley, but brings along someone else who's suspicious of what happened to the previous owner of Netherfield. And yeah, Darcy and this other guy do not behave well with Lizzie. But, so drama ensues, basically. But yes, so there was a lot of Jane Austen variations this month. I really need to do some more Hugo reading. There's been a lot of reading to do for university. I've just finished reading another novel for university. There's some more poetry for this week. Then I actually do have a 2-week break in which I need to read Great Expectations, but I've got 2 weeks to do that. So hopefully I'm going to get some more Hugo reading done shortly. And yeah, hopefully some more towards my goals. I've got to really think of a strategy because I'm so behind and I'm really disappointed with myself, to be honest. But yes, that was my August reading month. There were 11 things. I did read a lot. It just kind of feels like I haven't been reading what I should be reading. But that's the way things go. And at least I'm reading. So I will leave it at that. And I will see you all again really soon. Bye.